have a quorum then. I can go ahead and call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I guess our first action would be consideration of the minutes from our previous meeting on August 5th. Hopefully people have had a chance to review those. Any comments or concerns?
No comments or no concerns from George.
Nothing from Lonnie. I move to accept the minutes as presented.
I second.
I'm in favor.
Okay, and then Joe, help me please. Do I need to do a roll call?
Yes, ma'am. If you
Okay.
just going down, you can call the first name if you want. And when she calls your name, if you just say whether you approve, if you have changes, etc.
Okay, Karen? Don't know that she's joined us yet. George?
I approve.
Candy? Alan?
Sorry, I have one minor adjustment, Joe, on number 8, information sharing. Midway through, it says letter to TriNet regarding the SWC project Ding Tigard. I'm not sure what the ding is, if you can clarify that, or maybe it needs to be updated.
It probably needs to be updated. I'll take a look at that and fix that.
That's it. It was just minor. Otherwise, approved.
Thank you. Carl?
I'm here on the phone.
Carl, you're on the phone. Do you approve the minute?
Yes.
Thank you. Ben?
I approve.
And Richard?
I approve.
Serge? Holly?
Approve.
Lonnie?
Approved.
Sarah? Lindsay?
I approve.
Okay, and this is Ruth, and I approve as well. So minutes have been adopted or accepted.
Yay.
Go back through my papers as I look for the agenda here. Just a second. Okay. I don't know that we have any public comment. So I'd like to welcome our guests from TriMet. If you would like to introduce yourselves, and we were talking about the Southwest Corridor CDR final draft.
I actually do not see them on this call yet, so we might need to loop back to that topic. Sorry.
Thank you. That's fine. It sounded. Do we have people with the Tigard Parks Master Plan?
Yes, you do. This is Carla Stetter, and I'm one of 2 project managers for the Parks Master Plan, and happy to provide an update. I'll share my screen real quick here.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yay, Carla.
Do you see it here? Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. Screen 2. All right, we'll get going here.
Yeah, we can see it.
So as you all probably know, it's been 10 years since we updated our last Parks Master Plan, and so it's actually going on 11. And so we've undertaken the effort to start to plan for the next 10 years. I think the good news is we got just about everything done that was identified in the last Park and Recreation Master Plan, and so so this is going to be a great framework to drive us forward in the future. So when we put a Parks Master Plan together, it's unlike a lot of utility plans that are more technical, this has a tremendous amount of public input because we're serving, obviously serving people's recreational needs, and that varies and amongst and is as individual as people are. So, so we have a long public input process. We start with a system inventory and analysis. We take a look at where we were, where we are now, and then we start to assess what kind of needs we have out there. And then we compare what we've got to what the needs are showing us. We develop recommendations and prioritization, and then we develop it's sort of a 15,000 elevation look. Are you guys hearing a feedback?
Yes, that's crazy. What is that?
Everybody needs to mute if they are.
Okay. I think somebody was having problems with their mic. So the scope and schedule have been extended a little bit, and there's been 2 changes. Because we're very public involvement heavy on a park and rec master plan, COVID had a major impact on the project. Generally, we would have numerous open houses, numerous face-to-face meetings with all different kinds of user groups. And we got a few of those done before COVID hit. And then we had to adapt and redo the way we engage and we get people involved. We also decided to add scope to the project, and so we want to do an updated look and a 5-year plan look at our recreation program, which is still in its early stages of development compared to a lot of much more robust programs. So when we do an analysis, we take a look at how Tigard has changed and what their demographics are, and that helps give us information to drive the development of the master plan. Some of the interesting things about Tigard are 47% of its residents are either under 18 or over 55. This is important in a parks master plan because those are really heavy users of the system. And so it's kind of interesting to see how our demographics have changed since the last master plan. We do have a real wide diversity of household income across the community. We've got 3,000 households that live on under 25,000 a year, and then we have 7,000 that are about 34% of our population that are quite high earners. As you probably already know, the majority of the community is white, about 82%, and then we also break down ethnicity and foreign-born populations and where they're located. That helps us when we're establishing equity across the system. So here's Tigard Parks as they sit in 2020. We have 270 acres of developed parks. That's 79 additional acres up from the last parks master plan. We have 234 acres of natural area. We've acquired 44 acres since the last master plan. And the last master plan, in case you were unaware, was very focused on property acquisition. And then we've had 5 years of an expanding recreation program. In that time period, in the last 10 years, we were able to add over 100 acres of parkland, and they show up here in the blue. The positive thing about that was we had a well-timed bond issue. Our city residents were very supportive of parks expansion, and during the Great Recession of 2009, actually passed a bond measure to allow us to gather additional parks land when the real estate market was very down and we could get good prices. So we were able to bring in a lot of additional parkland in that 10 years. This is just a breakdown of how many of what we have. We always look at that. I think for you guys, probably some of the most important things are the 16 miles of trails that wrap through Tigard that serve both a recreation purpose and a transportation purpose. Then we look at recreation trends. Those change over the decades, and we evaluate the social activity, community involvement, demographic changes, what's health and wellness looking like, how are we activating our public spaces, how do we look at multi-use and dynamic parks, what programs and activities do we have going on, where is our parkland located in developed areas, and what's the demand for our trail-based activities. And then we also explored, how has COVID impacted our park system and how we deliver services. So here's some just trends in general. The city is currently getting a lot more out of our park and public spaces by providing programming and kind of engaging those spaces. So, like the movies in the park and things like that really help to expand the use of the facilities that we already have. And it enhances a lot of the community benefits, health, and allowing people to mingle. Obviously, that's not going on right now, but we need to plan for that. We know that will come back. We have an increased participation among our underserved groups, and we're also providing critical services to our vulnerable populations, with the public facilities that we have. And then we're doing all we can to activate our public spaces. We've been having pop-ups in the park and things like that are really helping us to engage our park system a lot more than what we did 10 years ago. Here's some of the trends that we found coming out of COVID. This has been the population's basically a response to this. There's been a huge increase in the demand for parks and trail and open space. There's been a significant decrease in our program and our facility rental revenues, as you can imagine. Our outdoor green spaces and physical activities have really been utilized, and what it appears from the public input that we've asked for is people are using our parks facilities to reduce stress and to improve mental health. And then we also are making sure to keep our public restrooms open for homeless populations because it's very critical for their health during COVID. So here's, I'm going to take you through what we're using to establish how well we're doing at providing park services and basically on the ground kind of services. This has more to do with the park infrastructure than the recreation piece of it. So in the old days, back when I first started my career, we would look at, there were national standards for like neighborhood parks and regional parks and things like that. And you were supposed to have X amount of ball fields per 1,000 population. And what we found is by utilizing that method, we end up with a lot of inequity. Tigard's at a really interesting stage where we're expanding out into the River Terrace area. And we're starting, and because those are modern developments that we're developing to modern day standards, we're starting to see a natural inequity because we have these newer neighborhoods with these, flashy new parks, and we have older areas that were developed when we were just sort of a sleepy suburb where people had bigger yards and didn't use as intense of recreation facilities. So we are seeing as part of that inequities developing. So what we utilize now in order to try to look at that and and address it is, and this is a standard that was developed by the Trust for Public Land. We look at a 10-minute walk analysis, and we try to see where are we providing services, and who is covered, and basically who is not covered. So the 10-minute walk analysis here, the blue area shows all the neighborhoods that are within, and a 10-minute walk is about a quarter mile. The blue areas are all of the neighborhoods that are within that distance to an existing park facility. So you can see that we have we still have a ways to go, and development of some of our newer parks would help with that. Get to the next slide here. Then we look at, who is within a 10-minute walk of our major trails, because they serve as extremely important recreation facilities. And sometimes you can utilize, as you're developing park systems, you can utilize trail systems, like develop little pocket activities along those trail systems, and you can enrich the experience of trail use and expand that experience. So that's why we take a look at this. From that, what we've done is we've broken down 12 different underserved park areas, and we're able to look at the demographics, the housing types of those park services, and it helps us to make more equitable decisions about, okay, as we're moving forward to develop, how do we kind of balance the system out and start to address the inequities that form naturally when a city is at this stage of development. So we have 12 different neighborhoods that are considered, basically park deficit, and then we have demographics for each of those neighborhoods, and we can take a look at those, and that can help us to drive our prioritization. So I wanted to go through just at the end here a bit of what we did in the community, or in our community engagement activities, and we still have community activities going on, community engagement activities continuing. So from the beginning of the project, literally before we had the first startup date, we started to collect data. We hit all of our large public events before COVID hit. We've done, and those we tend to use something called an intercept dot exercise, and it helps us see, overall what types of activities and how people are using the park system and what they want to see in the future. And then we had some stakeholder interviews. Some of those were virtual, where we talked to the organized sports groups. We talked to some of the more, like the Tualatin River Keepers, the natural area folks. We talked to our providers of recreation services, and we get input from them on how we're doing with that kind of work. And then we also had we have had two different surveys that have been online. One is live right now, and I'll give you that website so that you can go out and take a look at it. Here's what we heard. These are the basic trends of what we've heard so far. There's a really big push for the walking, running, biking trails. That's hugely popular, and it's it's right up there with reading for the most important recreation activities that our community uses. We have an extremely high use of our trails and our community parks, and any area where we have access to nature. There's a strong desire for these trails to be connected. They also are looking for unique play experiences like nature play and things like that. And parks that are within walking distance to their houses and have access to nature. We have capacity and cost constraints on the number of youth that can be involved in our organized sports. So we could use more sports fields and then ways to engage those sports fields. There's equitable access or people desire that we have equitable access for all abilities, ages, and backgrounds. That's come out in the survey. That's something that is a really strong community value. And then they like the focus on activating park sites and supporting these community-driven efforts. Those have been very popular. And that the general attitude from the public has been that the city has done a lot with their existing resources. They do feel that there's a need for additional funding to continue building and maintaining the system. So out of all of that, where we sit so far is we've identified a whole bunch of opportunity and a handful of challenges. So our opportunity is we have existing land and we have existing facilities, and we can begin developing those and moving forward in providing park services. We have an evolving and growing recreation program, and that is a great opportunity for us to continue to grow. We have opportunities to complete and link our trail systems. We have urban renewal areas, especially the Tigard Triangle. That's going to be a great way to provide equity and a great opportunity to provide additional recreation facilities. And because of COVID-19, there's a huge push for close to home recreation, as in a little less focus on our regional parks and more focus on our local neighborhood parks. The challenges, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is we currently are not serving Tigard equitably. It's not a thing that's done. It's not a purposeful thing. It's sort of a very typical thing with a town that's at the stage of development that Tigard is. We need to fill in gaps in the built community, and that's always harder because it's hard to acquire land and it's hard to retrofit. We need to discuss funding for a growing system, and we need to look for ways to connect our neighborhoods, increase walkability, and we need to address how do we sustain our system during recession as that arises and ebbs and flows. So that's it for the update. There were a couple other things I wanted to share. Hold on a second. I gotta click on this and get out of there. And then I'll bring over the other piece of information I had brought that's much more transportation oriented. And now where did it go? Are y'all still breathing?
Yeah, I had a couple questions about that part of the presentation there. Is this the next bit related, or is it different from this topic?
I was just going to show you. I just wanted to share with you. Oh, here it is. There we go. I knew I was organized and had this all up. I just buried it under a bunch of other things. So I wanted to share with you guys just a little bit about where we're collecting and what kind of information we're collecting around our non-motorized transportation system, and also connections between our park systems, walkability, sidewalks, all that kind of stuff. So we included a number of questions in the survey that are oriented towards that. So, what improvements would make you more likely to walk to parks and other destinations? how has your use of parks and trails changed as a result of COVID? What's the most positive thing you could imagine to come out of this under the stay-at-home order? And what ideas do you have for future parks? So those will probably elicit direction on the non-motorized transportation. And then I thought it was interesting. Let me pick up my notes here. So I had our consultants pull some of the latest. Our current survey that's out, we've had 578 respondents, and the survey is sort of non-traditional. You grab a point and you put it down at your closest park, and then you answer questions, and then you can pin areas that you think need, where you have ideas or where you think you need help or where you want to see greater access to parks or greater use of the trails, those kinds of things. And so we've had 578 people respond, and they've placed 1,331 points on the maps. Let's see. One of the questions, it's, how has your park use and trails changed since COVID? We have significant number who are using our trails much more heavily. You can see it in the trends in the two charts that I've got up on my screen here. So I did a little bit of quick math on the upper one. How has your use of parks and trails changed as a result of COVID? And compared to last year, I'm using parks and trails, and 109 of those respondents said that they were using them less, and 137 said more, and then the rest were sitting in the middle. Then how compared to last year, are you walking more or less? And 166 respondents said they're walking more, and 67 said less. So we can see those changes in the trends. So I did not answer your question though. So if you could re-ask me, that would be great.
Well, sorry, this is Alan here. I didn't actually ask the questions that I just wanted to know if it was related or not. But the first question I have is on equitability. Last month, and this may not be a fair question to you, so I need to lean on Joe to maybe help describe it. But last month, David shown us a map of various, what's the word for types of people and ages and wherever they live in the area. I forget what.
Yep.
It was a map of Tigard that showed us how close people were to different services, their ages, their general race and parts of the population. Is that a similar map that you are using? Is it a map that Tigard kind of as a whole uses, or are you really only looking at distance from a park and that's your major metric?
No, we're not only looking at distance from a park. So when you get to that slide that shows you the 12 neighborhoods that are park deficient, we also have demographic breakdown of each one of those neighborhoods.
Thank you. That's the one I was thinking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tough to show it on a slide, but we know what the makeup is of all of those neighborhoods. We know how many people of color there are there. We know what the breakdown of people's income is, and so that will help to drive us and help us to make sure that we become much more equitable.
Okay, so I guess more of a question for Joe. It would be a Dave question. Is that a common chart that is being used across the city, or is people pulling kind of data as they want it through the projects that they're working on?
As memory serves, and I'll have to refer that question to Dave, as memory serves, our GIS department put that together for us, so it's available citywide. I'm not sure who's using it.
Okay. But that's good to know that it's probably coming from the same data source though, and not duplicating work for that.
Yeah, we're definitely using the same data source. I know which layer you're talking about. It was originally put together quite a while back. We were going after some funding, and so we wanted to show. It was for Dirksen Nature Park, and so I asked them to run a query of that. So they updated that query, and did it and collected all of that data citywide, and that's what's created this, and that created that underlying layer.
So the other question is, this survey, is it something that's still going on?
Yes, it is. Let me scroll here.
So what we've
Back
seen,
up.
what we've seen so far is kind of a capture of the survey so far.
Yes.
I
what
can
you've
send out
seen
that
is,
link. I'll get it from Carla and send it out later to everybody.
yeah, and please go out and take this. Allow yourself a little bit of time, because it's it's not just to fill in the blanks. We really ask you to stick pins in and really comment heavily on what you want to see.
Okay. So I guess my ask is, when the survey is closed and when time comes around, when there's talk of funding sources for that, would we be able to access the complete data from the survey and not just?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all a public record, and we'll definitely have that accessible. And that kind of information will drive a lot of direction, a lot of the direction of the plan.
Well, thank you, Carla, for all the information. Any additional questions?
Our folks from TriMet are available. If not, I would just like to remind our members and let our guests from TriMet know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our Tigard YouTube channel.
Okay, and I'd like to thank Carla for coming and sharing all this information. I'm sure that the members of the committee will go on and look at your survey.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla.
Okay, so we will go back to our previous agenda item, the Southwest Corridor CDR final draft, and welcome our guests from TriMet.
Thank you, Ruth, and sorry for the technical difficulties. This is Fiona Cundihiro with TriMet, and Amparo Agosto and Jeb Doran are also here tonight with me. So let me share my screen. I'm sorry, I'm really unfamiliar with using Microsoft Teams. How would I share my screen?
It's the icon just to the right of the microphone.
It's a rectangle with an arrow pointing up. Yeah.
Wonderful. Can you all see that?
There you go.
All right. So yeah, thanks for having us here tonight. I know we only have 20 minutes, so we'll be brief. I was going to sort of lead off, and then Jeb was going to follow with a little bit more of the project details and specifics. We were here exactly 6 months ago, March 3rd. We had just put out our draft conceptual design report. And I just want to acknowledge that we received this committee's letter last week. So thank you for sort of, emphasizing what your committee's priorities are. We're totally behind them. And hopefully we can sort of share what our work plan is moving forward. Actually, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so purpose of the project, we still have our regional growth concept. It is the backbone of our project and really trying to connect regional centers. We are really trying to do this project because of the growth that we anticipate in the region. Our rail map shows how the future extension is envisioned to plug into our current rail system. And really the whole reason why we're doing this is to maintain the quality of life for the region, address mobility and congestion, really try to address our climate and action goals and environmental opportunities, and working towards our affordable housing goals as well. So this map, I think everyone has seen, really no changes since you've seen it last, just still 13 stations, 30-minute ride, 37,500 trips per day. We are connecting 3 transit centers. We have a whole lot of great streetscape scope attached to the project. And we are, I'll highlight, making specific connections to Markham Hill and the PCC Sylvania campus. And with our project scope, we do have still 10 miles of new sidewalks, 6 miles of improved bike facilities. We have a 1.6 mile transit-only lane, similar to what you see on the photo on the left with the Telecom crossing. We have about 2,000 park and ride spaces in the project scope. And we, it just actually calculated, we have about 10.5 miles of roadway improvements as well. So I'm going to kind of walk through just a highlight of what's changed since the draft of the CDR came out this previous January. You know, it really still tries to define all of the benefits of the project and how they're oriented around these 4 shared values of, you know, mobility, maintaining our equitable communities, addressing the environment, and thinking about the future. And so really the stuff that has changed is really trying to like dial in on what we heard. We did a ton of outreach, got some really great feedback. We heard a lot of interest in learning more about bike facilities, future mobility services, how will those be integrated into the project. We heard a lot of interest in, you know, what is this bridge going to look like? What is that structure going to look like? So we've incorporated a series of what we're calling toolkits based on sort of the context of each structure. And Jeb is going to walk through these a little bit more in depth. We heard a lot of just general feedback that we tried to capture and respond to in updates to our site plans and site design. And we heard an overwhelming support for trying to get more affordable housing. So we tried to unpack a little bit more about how we are going to meet our affordable housing commitments as a project with our partners. And so I just want to say this is posted online on our website. I'd encourage you all to look through it. It was published in August. It really is, it's a snapshot in time of where the project is today. And so it won't be updated, you know, in the coming years as we continue design. But it really is a tool for folks to understand more about the project. So starting off with a little bit more detail on station access, we have this hierarchy that we're using about, you know, how we're thinking about each mode connecting to our stations. They're all incredibly important. We have walk, bike, bus transfer, mobility services, and autos. So we're really trying to think about, you know, what are the tools for how we are going to connect each of those users. And in the bottom of this slide, you can see really how we're thinking about sort of the reach of each of these modes. So, you know, shorter trips, we're calling neighborhood trips, less than 3 miles. Those we're hoping to really position as close as possible to the light rail station itself. We've drawn a sort of 100-foot buffer around the station area. And then thinking about the larger regional trips, such as someone driving in for a park and ride, you know, you're not going to have a park and ride 50 feet from the platform, but, you know, trying to put it in a good position adjacent to the station. So I'm going to walk through each of these modes and just kind of unpack a little bit more about how we're thinking about them in terms of design. So starting with walking, we are really trying to take the conversation towards a place that we're talking about transit-oriented development as like the key component of our walking ridership. So we know as a region that when you build transit-oriented development, you're creating mixed uses, mixed incomes around a station area. You have a much less dependency on an automobile to get around. And so really that provides sort of the backbone of providing great walkable transit access is just density around a station. And we have heard this loud and clear from our partners at the City of Tigard, which is great. And they actually took it a step further and said, we want to like really drive the commitment of transit-oriented development at our station areas further. And so right after we came in March, we actually formed what we called a charter. And it was really just an outline of a work scope that said, let's take a new look at each of these station areas in Tigard and really try to step away from like a lot of the engineering moves and start thinking about urban design and transit-oriented development. And really, are there tweaks to the alignment that we could make that would really sort of benefit the station area as a whole? So Jeb is going to walk through this a little bit more in detail, but I just want to say that there's sort of three primary areas that we're looking at, and we agreed with our partners that we'd start with Elmhurst, we'd move on to Hall Station, and then we would start looking at 68th. So we're in the midst of this work right now. And so just on the bottom of the screen, you can see sort of how we're trying to look at these visions from the city's perspective and try to steer the light rail alignment to really kind of capture that vision. So back to station access, another thing I mentioned that we heard a lot of was just interest in bikes. It's an unusual thing in that the federal government really measures very clearly walk-ons, transit riderships, automobiles, but bikes aren't specifically qualified in the mode split that we do. So we went out and we did a lot of research with our consultant team to try to define what we're calling these bike catchments. And so they're 3 mile capture areas that really try to take into account existing facilities, planned facilities, barriers such as freeways, topography, what are the constraints, and what is sort of the reality of each bike shed around each station area. And so a lot more on that in the CDR if you're interested. And Dave, will say Dave Roth was involved in helping us work through this process and can be a huge resource to share what we learned. Bus transfers, I think, we talked about this last time. This hasn't changed too much since you've seen it. It is, about 23% of our anticipated ridership would connect via bus. Emerging mobility services. This was something we also heard a lot of interest in, just, questions about how are you accommodating scooters and e-bikes and lift drop-offs. And so we're really trying to think about at TriMet as a whole, how do you connect all of these pieces, particularly at a station where there's so much opportunity to use right-of-way space and parking rides and future transit-oriented developments, trying to think about the space of each of these things and how we can really accommodate that in our design to make these connections as easy as possible. So maybe I'll just go over this quickly. Really, there's kind of 3 ways that we're looking at all of these components. There's a lot of ways that we're trying to get people to the station, that the project will be physically building, a bike lane, a sidewalk, a park and ride. There's what I mentioned, transit-oriented development. TriMet alone doesn't build it. We seek partnerships. We try to, leverage assets, but that's a shared responsibility. And then there's what we're calling sort of the other mobility options. So this includes all of our partner projects and looking at some of those market services such as Bike Town and how we can include them in our station area. Before I hand off to Jeb, I just want to touch on the station access projects. When I was there meeting with you all in March. I heard loud and clear there's a ton of interest in the 217 MUP in particular. And we heard the same thing from the community, which is great. A lot of support for it, as well as Station Access Project 26, which is sidewalks on Hall Boulevard, as well as the 72nd Street sidewalks and bikeways. So these will all be cleared under our project environmentally. We are still seeking funding for all of them. So TriMet in particular is working with partners to try to figure out, identify funding sources. The MUP specifically, we did apply for a build grant in May of this year. I don't believe we've heard back anything yet. But and one more slide. So autos, really, they're also in mode. We have 5 park and ride stations. This hasn't changed too much since January. Really one structure down at Bridgeport Transit Center, and then the other 4 would be envisioned to be surface. So without taking up too much time, I am going to pass this off to Jeb, and he's going to walk through a few more of those details that are in the final draft. Jeb, on there?
Yes, I'm
Lauren?
here. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. So as Fiona mentioned, we've published our CDR, and besides displaying a lot of information out for the public, it really marks a big transition in the project where we start moving away from talking about which alignment is the best alignment to what is the design, what does it look like, how do we take all of these individual pieces of streetscapes and design, station platforms and urban design elements and overhead structures and stitch them all together and fit these pieces of the puzzle together to create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. It's really about creating consistency in the transit identity, but yet still being flexible so we can reflect the identity of each of the places that we serve. And within this, the CDR provides some toolkits which we can start looking at here on the next slide. So one thing that the CDR did was really started putting a lot more focus on what are the standard right-of-way elements that we use within the city, or use within the street right-of-ways and public streets and in and around the right-of-way in order to give that station identity. And what are the things that we've done for public spaces, which tend to be more unique and flexible in their appearances, again, to reflect that community space. On the next slide, it shows some of the tools kits that we'll be looking at for the appearances of bridges and walls and the systems themselves. Really trying to understand, what is the look and feel of these, and how do we use each of these tools to help better reflect structural elements and other elements of the projects to better reflect their context and how they sit within, the Tigard Triangle or within downtown Tigard and other locations. This is important because this is the process where the community will have a lot of input on how these things look, and I'd like you to just kind of think about these elements and these appearances as we start walking through the alignment on this next slide. So I'm going to quickly start up at the north and the triangle and kind of go through these pretty quickly so we can get to some questions. At the transition, this is an important structure because it really marks the transition from Portland to Tigard. There is a portion that flies over the top of the highway and I-5, and then it dives through an underpass under Pacific Highway before landing at the station area. And then again, it elevates up over more of an urban context at the 68th roadway, and then into the natural area to fly over Red Rock Creek. And then this on the next slide, the 68th station has a up to 350 space park and ride at this location. It's really about serving both the north end of the Tigard Triangle in the city of Tigard, but also the city of Portland, serving both Metzger and Crestwood neighborhoods. Access here is a really important issue. We've done some work at 64th and 68th. There's a planned Red Rock Creek Trail that is just to the south of this site, along with some community affordable housing that's advancing. And then bus transfers are also important for this station with the lines 93 and 94. But we do recognize we still have a lot of work to do. There's the what is the streetscape and how do we of 99W? How do we do more for the intersections to make sure we have safe pedestrian crossings? Is there ways to improve the permeability of 99W with the mid-block crossing? And also, how do we address bicycles and bicycle connections along 99W? On the next slide, we start moving into 70th Avenue, also a very important element to the project, as 70th is designated kind of as the pedestrian spine of the triangle. We're looking at some shared street designs to help accommodate all the new development that's underway in the area, as well as facilitate the implementation of the light rail alignment and make those bike and ped connections from the north to the south of the triangle. But we do recognize there's a lot more to do here. We've had some conversations and through the Tigard Charter about Tigard's preferred street design concepts, looking at a stormwater street, as well as the pedestrian permeability across the tracks themselves from in east-west direction. And then, of course, the safety of the intersections at each of these locations, making sure that we have adequate pedestrian facilities for people to get across busy streets, especially those at Dartmouth. And then looking at the appearance of the Dartmouth structure itself and understanding how to make this structure fit into its urban context. On the next slide is the Elmhurst Station. This is, as Fiona mentioned, was the first out of the gates for the Tigard Charter process. And so, this station being the heart of the triangle is an important one. It also sits at the crossroads of mobility. There's a 72nd Avenue bike and pedestrian study, and building some important connections over time. The 70th Avenue, as I mentioned, for the pedestrian spine north-south through the triangle. There's also bus transfers for the line 97 occurring at the station. And then the city's 217 MUP landing in here, so right at the transit station. So a lot of different things coming together here for an important connection. This was a success story of the charter efforts so far, and that we were able to make some changes here to help improve that development vision and the overall vision and support Elmhurst Street as the urban spine through the neighborhood. And those were basically just adjusting the alignment to help consolidate that intersection at 72nd Avenue and make sure that we're accounting for the south leg of the intersection on 70th. But we do still have some more work to do in how to best position this station to maximize those connections with that crossroads, and then continue to support Tigard in their grant applications for finding funding for that 217 MUP. So on the next slide, we're flying over the 217 structure into downtown. This is a very long structure passing through both natural areas as well as a highway overpass. And again, looking at the north side of the structure to make that MUP connection from 72nd in the triangle on over to Hunziker, creating that new connection between downtown and the triangle. The next slide is the Hall Station. This is a very important station in that it serves the downtown Tigard area as well as the Hunziker Industrial Core jobs and employment center. The design here really requires some traffic mitigation and looking at how we can address signalization and other things at Hunziker. It also requires some streetscape improvements on Hall and commercial, with the commercial improvements really helping to facilitate the bus transfers from the lines 76 and 78, and putting new sidewalks and bus facilities and other things, as well as an improved crossing across Hall to help make the connections to the transit center. We also include a 100-space park and ride and the operations and maintenance facility here. So this is an important one. This is kind of the big effort around the Tigard Charter to really look at what changes can we do to put TOD front and center and better support that downtown Tigard vision, the Hunziker Industrial Core, and just all of the connections here in this area. So that includes looking at the alignment itself and the station and the orientation of the OMF to make adjustments to find the best outcomes and what is the best way we can integrate bus service here with the light rail station and be able to create more space for the future development vision in downtown Tigard. it's also important to remember, the bike and pedestrian connections in those discussions and how we can make sure that we're bringing people as safely into the station, as well as enhancing that safe crossing of Hall and Commercial. On the next slide is the Bonita station. This is the only elevated station on the alignment and would be the only elevated in our system. So there's a lot of work here to do to look at what is the appearance of this station and how do we land this in its context to the Fano Creek Trail connections, and also that, sort of sitting between the border of both housing and an employment center. We have a lot of work to do. I would also mention this is the connection for the Line 37 bus transfers. And we do have more work to do around the appearance of the station itself, as I mentioned, and waypoint finding to get people to the access points, and so they know how to get to the station, and creating safe pedestrian access from Fano Creek Trail and as well as across Bonita. The next slide is Upper Boone's Ferry. This is right in the heart of the employment area, industrial employment area. And right now the design has a split near side platforms that help facilitate a safer track crossing in coordination with traffic movements. And we do have some more work here to do to look at how we can do safer pedestrian and connections and address some traffic mitigations for this site. And then the last one is the Bridgeport Village Station, which is just the other side of the Tigard city limits and lands in Tualatin, serving Bridgeport Village as well as Tualatin area. Lots of bus connections here with the transit center, as well as up to a 960 space park and ride structure and a ped bridge connecting those facilities across Lower Boone's Ferry into the station area. Again, lots more work to do here, looking at safe pedestrian crossings and at the 72nd intersection design, being able to optimize the transfers between the buses and the light rail station, traffic mitigation, and just overall development potential in the area in coordination with City of Tualatin. So as I mentioned, this next phase, in the next slide here, we're entering a new phase of design iteration and conversations with the community about the look and feel of this project. We will be seeking a lot of community engagement to help guide the technical staff and decisions and feed that information to the steering committee and to the community advisory committee for their input as well. And with that, I will stop and ask if there's any questions.
Thank you for all the information, and go ahead, Karen.
Is that, I think maybe you called on me. I'm not sure.
Yes.
This is Corinne.
Corinne.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question to get us started. The MUP, I'm racking my head here for what that stands for, and I just cannot figure that out for the life of me.
My apologies. That stands for multi-use path. So it'd be a pedestrian and bicycle connection adjacent to the light rail alignment that travels across the light rail structure to connect the triangle bike and ped facilities in the triangle to those in downtown.
So to just try to make sure I'm understanding here. So this is a separate path that is not part of the elevated structure? Or
it would be part of the elevated structure. And if we secure the funding, we'd essentially be widening that structure to integrate the multi-use path across on that same structure. So they wouldn't be separate. They'd be part of the same overpass.
You guys kind of conceive of them as two separate elements. One element is the structure that provides the path for the actual light rail, and then there is the portion of the structure that would provide the multi-use pedestrian access.
Correct. Yes. All one structure with two functional uses and spaces. With the pedestrian facilities to one side and bike facilities to one side, and then the light rail facilities to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think this is Richard. I think I have a similar question. I wasn't sure what the TOD stood for at the Hall station.
Pardon. Sometimes I forget I speak in a different language with all the acronyms. So that's transit-oriented development.
Okay,
This
thank
idea that Fiona was talking about with mixed use and mixed income development in and around the station areas.
Okay.
Thank
I
you,
have
Al.
one more question.
Mhm.
At the beginning of the presentation, I saw that you listed, I think it was 10 miles of new sidewalk. Is that replacing existing sidewalk, or is that sidewalk where there was no sidewalk before?
Both.
Both.
And I don't know the breakdown of that. So there's several gaps in sidewalk connections along Barber, as well as in the areas where the triangle and building a new street connection in several locations down 70th, as well as some of in the streetscape improvements on Commercial and Hall.
Okay.
In the City of Tigard.
Conceptually, so I can get my head around it, will there basically be a sidewalk from Portland to Tigard at the end of this?
Yes, I
Yes.
think that's right. Yeah, I mean there's some areas where we run adjacent to the highway south of BTC where we are completing a sidewalk infill connection.
Okay.
So yes, I do believe we would have sidewalk connections running all the way to Tigard. Yes.
Oh,
There might be still a gap at Farmer when it comes under like
oh,
that
yeah.
wraparound, up the hill there.
I'm sorry, say that again. I didn't quite catch that.
There still might be a gap on Barber coming up the hill from 5.
Yeah, I was trying to think if I believe there's existing sidewalks across the I-5 bridge overpass, and since we are looking at pedestrian connections from 64th and restoring sidewalk on the south side of that street of 99W to 68th, yeah, I think there would be pedestrian connections. I'm the part that made me hesitate is I'm not sure. I think there's sidewalk on both sides of 68th. From that station into the triangle, which would complete the connection. And then we do sidewalks, of course, on 70th Avenue.
So Alan, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I had a clarifying question about the Elmhurst Station. Was the Atwell feature there just as an example of what could be built in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, there's something local that everyone's familiar with as a reference point.
Got it. And then as like new buildings in the Tigard Triangle get updated, is that information that's being updated within these this plan with additional housing that will be like right near these stations, especially Elmhurst?
Yes.
Like there was just a building that was approved.
Yes, we've been coordinating with the City of Tigard staff and really a lot of the development scope in general, like how station area development and occurs is really led by the city. And so we've been coordinating with them to make sure that we're staying up to date on all current projects that are going in and around station areas and in and around the alignment, because we know there's a lot of stuff going on, especially in the triangle.
Okay. And then I think I may have just missed it when we were listening. For the Hall Street station there, is the maintenance yard still in the plans to be located at that?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
This is a crazy question. Is this PowerPoint presentation available somewhere for us?
Yes, I believe it is
I'll
available.
share it with
We've provided it to Joe. And then I would also say that all of this content is included and in more detail in the conceptual design report, which Joe also has a link for downloading if you don't have it already.
Thank you. I wanted to really take a look at the Hall Street safety pieces. I'm a daily transit user and I know what it's like, what it would be like to get across the street from the downtown Tigard West Station right now to the transit station across Hall Boulevard. And I'm really concerned about that for anyone that would want to use that. And so I want to take a real close look at that. In addition, I saw a little closer on how the alignment's going near, well, it's going near where my office is moving to, and there's a lot of disadvantaged people who use the service that we have, and I want to see how easy it would be for them to use the public transportation system, the MAX, to get to where we are, so that they could be served better.
Yeah, we welcome all the feedback that, if you come up with something with Hall, we'd love to hear it. And if you have some specific questions about service or other things, I would recommend coordinating with Joe and Amparo Agosto, who's our community affairs representative, and we can get some answers to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Crean again. I'm glad we're on the Hall Street station here. I was wondering if you guys could, show how you're anticipating buses are going to be entering this thing. And my assumption is that this would replace the existing transfer station in downtown Tigard that's co-located right next to the West Station.
So in the FEIS assumptions and what's represented in the CDR, we are not relocating the transit center. We keep the existing transit center in place to serve the downtown area and west and the light rail. The key here to understand is the 76 and the 78, lines 76 and 78 are the two lines that continue south on Commercial, and you can see the two orange dots there are the stops that they serve on Commercial, and then in the case of the 78 over on Hunziker, you can see those stops as well. Those are providing the majority of the bus transfers for the connections to Hall, because several of the other of the lines that feed into downtown Tigard connect to multiple stations. Like I mentioned, the line 97 on Elmhurst, then 93 and 94 at 68th. And so a lot of the transfers that people are making to connect into the light rail system are occurring at multiple stations throughout Tigard. And so we, in this case, the decision for the FEIS plans was to not relocate the transit center, leave those larger potential development areas around the station, and have the transfers occur on Commercial Street, which is why we are now redoing Commercial Street south of Ash to Hall, to put in wider sidewalks, to put in bus shelters, to put in more facilities, and focus on that safe crossing at Hall and a signalized crossing there at Hall and Commercial, to get people to the station. And I would point out that the charter discussions are having a more robust and revisiting that conversation to make sure that we understand the trade-offs with relocating and not relocating, and make sure that the transfers have the best pedestrian connections and things possible to the station.
So just to make sure I understand, so those are going to be like on-street transfers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people are going to, the bus is not going to pull in off of Hall Boulevard or off of Hunziker. They're just going to stop, and people, so there will be a lot of pedestrian traffic crossing Hall Boulevard and or crossing Hunziker as well.
I would say much more across Hall Boulevard. There is the Hall Station mode splits, which is how people get to the station, shows a pretty high, it's basically equal and high between bus transfers and walk-ons. And the majority of those are coming in and connecting, across that Commercial Hall intersection. So there will be a lot of pedestrian traffic there. It is very important that we focus on that cross section of the street and the safe crossing design, and consider protected intersection design at that crossing to give pedestrians and bicycle safe spaces and short crossing distances, which you can kind of see represented in the upper image there in the top right corner. to see some of the concepts around protected intersection design that works to bring the crossing landings closer together so pedestrians are not as exposed to cars and have more safe places to dwell.
Great, thank you.
This is Richard. I have a question about the operations and maintenance facility.
Sure.
I know we're early in the process, but when will we get some imagery of what this building will look like?
Yeah, I would say with all of our structures, so the operations and maintenance facility and the structures themselves, we want to start detailing and getting some conversations about what they look like by 60% design. And then what we traditionally do is use that input and that product to take into land use processes so that by the time we get to 90% design, then we have the final appearances confirmed and permitted and reviewed by the public, so we have that input and caught into the final design. So 60% design is scheduled to be through the end of 2021. And I believe 90% design is about a year after that. So within the next 2 years, we should have a real firm grasp and lots of conversations in between about what the OMF and all of the structures in Tigard look like.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Corinne.
Sorry, I just don't want to dominate the conversation, but and this question might be actually better directed to Dave, but the TriMet staff, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate having this presentation. They have mentioned the Tigard Charter a couple of times, and this is also not a familiar term for me. And so I was wondering, Dave, if you might be able to fill in the blank on that.
Yeah, Dave is not with us tonight because he's on vacation.
He's on vacation, Corinne.
Okay, well, I can jump in on that, Corinne. So, and this is Jeb again from TriMet. So the Tigard Charter is it's essentially a work plan, an agreement between TriMet and the City of Tigard to, as Fiona mentioned, up to through project development, we're pretty heavily focused on engineering and making sure that we're capturing the scope and budget to have a functional light rail transit facility. And so a lot of times that takes a very engineering centric approach. And what the charter does is says, okay, great, we've got that now, but we think we could, if we took transit-oriented development and some elements of urban design and we made that a higher priority, we may choose to make some design refinements to that engineering that better support Tigard's visions for the area. So here's a great example on the screen with the station at Elmhurst. So in this case, we made some adjustments to the alignment and the consolidated the intersection, all for the purpose of being a backbone to support this larger vision in Tigard, where Elmhurst is this like urban spine, east-west spine that connects in, and potentially looking at some other facilities to really emphasize that the crossroads that I had mentioned earlier with all of the different modes coming together at 72nd and Elmhurst, including a potential future MUP, and be able to better support that vision and maybe have a better potential transit-oriented development pattern around the station. And so this is heavily led by the city with TriMet support, again, to just look at how we can refine, is there small refinements that we can make that make big improvements and bigger return on investments and bigger benefits. And we've completed that process at Elmhurst Station and found, those minor adjustments do increase those benefits a lot. So we've incorporated those, and we'll be capturing those in the 60% design. Hall Station and 68th Station are still in process.
Yeah, okay, so this is an agreement of some sort, possibly similar to the MOU that we had previously, that speaks to more design specific elements of the station areas. And
Yeah,
is this binding in any way?
Well, no, it's not like an MOU type agreement or a memorandum of understanding for those who don't know the acronym. What I would characterize it is as the city's preferred work plan to feed into the existing MOU for a lot of the topics that are there around the Hall Station and 70th Avenue and things that are mentioned in the MOU. And so it was an effort to put more energy into the thought around urban design and TOD heading into 60% so we could better inform those MOU topics. And I think, you know, it'd be important to follow up with Dave and the city to get their input and perspectives on that, but I think they would generally characterize it the same way.
Councilor Goodhouser, if you're listening, do you have any input on that? Maybe Councilor Goodhouse is not listening at this time.
Yeah. And Lindsay, did you have any questions or comments?
I heard my name. Sorry, I was distracted
Okay.
for a moment. There's Councilor Goodhouse.
Councilor Goodhouse, could you give us some insight on, I believe it's a charter? Is that correct, Jeb?
Yeah, it's not a city charter. We use the term charter essentially as a work plan. So it's not something that's been formally adopted in the city like a Tigard
Okay.
charter. It's a different term. So I apologize for that confusion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess I don't need to jump in on that question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilor. No.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, do we have any other questions or? Okay, again, I'd like to thank you both for joining us tonight and sharing all this information. It sounds like Joe has some links that he'll be providing to us as a committee.
Thank you so much, TriMet, for being here, Jeb, and thank you very much, Fiona.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yep, no worries. It's a pleasure to be here.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, do you know, do we have a speaker from the Fano Creek Trail Project?
Yes, we do.
Before I introduce myself and get started, it's my first time joining the group. Don't know how they typically go, but seeing that I have just over 10 minutes, I'm a little nervous about getting through all the updates, especially if there's questions. So I guess I'd be curious, should I do what I had planned or just try to race through it to try to get back on the agenda time?
No, I think we're fine. The meeting actually goes until 8:30. If the committee is in agreement with that, we could let Zach do what he had planned.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd like
Yes.
to hear the full presentation.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it too. Kind of curious.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Zach Morris. I'm a senior project engineer with Tigard Public Works in the engineering division. Recognize some of the names and know I've communicated with some of you in the past, but I've only been at Tigard for about the last year and a half, so the rest that I have not met or talked to. That is why. Sorry, I thought I was muted. I have a number of projects assigned to me that are Fano Creek Trail related, and then also some other transportation projects. So separate from Fano Creek Trail, I will likely come back and talk to you at other times in the near future. Carla, who spoke earlier, and I are co-project managing one of our big trail projects, and then we each have some others that we're managing individually. So I will go ahead and share my screen. My plan is to more or less kind of go project by project, and I guess see if there's questions as we go. There's a couple I'd like to group together. We'll go from there. Okay. Actually, I want to start. This map is from the. Okay, I apologize. The map I want to show did not just pull up. Sorry. Okay, so this is very zoomed out. I don't expect anyone to be able to read it. I just want to use it for context. So this is the Fano Creek Trail from within the entire limits of the city of Tigard, up north here being at the city limit line with Beaverton at Shoals Ferry Road, coming down through downtown Tigard to the library, and then what will be eventually a trail all the way down to the Tualatin River and Cook Park. So this was a map that we put together a little over a year ago for the Tigard Street Fair, talked about the various projects, and I may come back to this as we go along just to kind of put where each of these projects are in the big picture. So I'm just going to start headed north to south. So up near Shoals Ferry Road, there's a couple things going on. And let me go back to the other map. Okay. Did that switch screens on your end?
It did, Zach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
So I'm assuming most of the group is familiar, but at Shoals Ferry Road, Fano Creek Trail crosses underneath the roadway. And over time, the flooding of the trail has gotten worse and worse, primarily due to beaver activity, and the floodplain restoration has been very successful, and that relates to the beavers. But when the trail floods, people have been forced to do other things, whether that's turn around and go back where they came from or head out of direction. If you're on the south side of Shoals Ferry Road, it'd be out of direction all the way to Conestoga Drive, the nearest traffic signal, or all the way to the east at Nimbus Avenue. But some folks were making the decision to just, as soon as they got up to Shoals Ferry Road, to dart across the road. It's a very busy road, not a very safe thing to do. So this is a unique location with a lot of different jurisdictions. So just city-wise, south of Shoals Ferry is Tigard, north of Shoals Ferry is Beaverton, south of Shoals Ferry, Tigard maintains Fano Creek Trail, north of Shoals Ferry, Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec maintains the trail, and then Shoals Ferry Road is a Washington County roadway, and then the creek, is essentially under the jurisdiction of Clean Water Services. So there's 5 agencies that all have some interest in what's going on there, and given all of the interest and concern from the public, including getting all the way up to elected officials, Tigard took the lead, and we engaged a engineering consultant to do a study of how we could do something different there to cross Shoals Ferry Road. For a number of reasons, we did not look at going above the road or doing a tunnel. The study really was focused at an at-grade option. And given the time, I'm just going to show what the proposed solution is. We just did a public open house to talk about this, and I'll summarize some of the results here in a minute. So this was what ranked as the highest option that we looked at. So headed south to north, you would come up, and right now there's just a short, steep connector that goes up to Shoals Ferry. So the proposal would be to do a new connection that starts farther back, that has grades that would meet accessibility requirements that aren't so steep, wouldn't have cross slope issues, would get up to Shoals Ferry Road, and then there would actually be a signalized pedestrian crossing. And similarly on the THPRD side, there'd be a new connection that comes over. These would meet regional trail standards. This sidewalk on Shoals Ferry would be widened to 10 feet. That would support, two-way bike and ped traffic. It'd be similar to what Fano Creek Trail does at Hall Boulevard to the north, except that Beaverton allows a different type of pedestrian signal than the county likely would. So this would likely be an actual signal, not necessarily the type of signal you see at Hall. But all five agencies.
Quick question, not to interrupt. Are you meaning to share a screen or an image? I don't see anything.
I see an image.
Yeah, I see it. Just check your window.
Yeah, I see an image as well.
Okay,
So do
maybe it's
I.
just me then. I just see ZM. That's all. It's just me, I guess.
Sorry, it's just a map showing what we're talking about. I apologize that you can't see it. Maybe I can follow up with Joe afterwards. So all five agencies felt pretty good about this. So we had a virtual open house, given everything going on with COVID. That was open the entire month of July. Actually, sorry, this is a rendering I'll pull up of it. So this would be looking east on Shoals Ferry Road. That connection I was talking about would come up. There'd be this new crossing with the signals. This doesn't show it, but the sidewalk would be widened here. So that's the proposal. This was just a study to look at it. There's no money to actually design or build it yet. So in the month of July, we did an online open house. There was actually really good turnout. We had about just over 1,500 people visit the site, and then various levels of engagement. Some folks clicked around. About 500 people took the survey. And to kind of summarize the results, about 65, there were some different questions, but 65 to 70% of people supported what we're doing in this area, and I'll talk about some of the other projects going on, while about 30% were neutral or were not in support. Carla, did you want to say something?
Nope, I'm good.
Or I thought I just saw someone raise a hand.
So that was Corinne.
Grant?
Okay.
And so if you could go back to that previous slide showing the intersection, that flashing light, is that planned to stay? People have a lot of confusion about that. And it's not always clear what to do, and some people stop even while it's flashing, and some people treat it like a stop sign while it's flashing. So I was just wondering if that signal is staying or if it might be part of whatever is being considered here.
Or Zach, are you
Is the one
looking
you're
at the power line trail that crosses Walker and Jenkins, like an actual stoplight?
The county does not do the flashing lights yet. This would be a full traffic signal, like solid red, solid yellow, solid green.
Wait,
Karina, were you referring to Hall Boulevard?
No, I was referring to the existing signal, not pictured on the map, but on the next slide.
There isn't one. There's no existing signal.
The next slide does not show an existing signal.
It's just a
Can you
render.
show the next slide?
This is a proposal. This is a rendering of what it would look like if it got constructed.
Okay, so this is not.
This doesn't exist today.
Okay, so but on Shoals, there is a crossing for a trail that has the flashing signal that people don't understand. This is, are you saying part of Shoals is in Tigard, and so?
No, there's no crossing there. You have to cross over at the Burger King up the road.
I think this is George. I think what Corinne is mentioning is that on Hall Boulevard, north of this, where the Fennel Creek Trail crosses back over Hall Boulevard, there's a flashing red light there where there's some confusion. People don't understand whether to stop or if it's a caution or what. So there's a lot of conflict between cars and bicyclists and pedestrians. I think that's what she's talking about.
Yeah. So, I'm just curious.
Not be any flashing. It would be a solid. I think that's.
I've never seen confusion. I don't know. Is that an assertion or is there some data? This is Ben. I was just curious because at the Hall crossing, is that something that's being watched? Because it seemed like every time it turned red, everybody stopped. Every time I've been there. So.
Yeah, it turns red, but it also flashes red before and after the cycle. And I've on my bicycle, I almost got hit because someone ran the flashing red light.
Yeah, flashing red light. I mean, flashing red light is a stop. That's
right,
just,
but
I mean, that's just bad driving. Yeah.
But so that it, you know, is it a stop like a flashing red is a stop where you stop and then you go? Or is it a stop where you remain stopped until you get a green light? So
Well,
if we're
I don't want to waste that time.
having any kind of flashing light, then that's fine. I just think it's confusing. And so it sounds like we're not planning on doing that at this site. So I'm good.
We're not even in a design phase yet. This is just all potential stuff, like what it could be for survey purposes. Is that right, Zach?
Yes. I mean, yes. So it's not final. That's not to say it couldn't be what is up on Hall, but to date, the county, that is not a standard type signal that they do on their roadways. Hall is a Beaverton roadway. So the indication so far is this would be what you would normally see at a signalized intersection where it's no flashing. So that's what's proposed to date.
Yes, Ben, I want to apologize. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't quite understand what you're saying. I was like, it's a stop, but then what do you do after you stop? That's the question, right? Yeah, okay. Sorry to interrupt everyone. I didn't mean to derail us there.
So we got those results from the survey, you know, and it depends who you talk to, but that's pretty good to have, you know, 70% support. Nothing we're ever going to do is going to make everybody happy. So one of the things I'm working on the next couple of weeks is trying to regroup with the other agencies and just get everyone to see if we all agree that everyone's on board to proceed based on that feedback. And what I mean by proceed would be to pursue funding for the actual design and construction as opportunities arise. So one potential source would be from Metro. So that would be a next step. So there's something else going on at this location, maybe before taking any other questions that sort of ties into it. So we got a lot of questions about, well, like, why don't you do something to fix the existing undercrossing or just raise it? And something is being done about it. So Clean Water Services installed a stream gauge, essentially monitoring the level of the creek a little over a year ago. And what they've seen is as little as a quarter inch of rain can flood the trail. So it doesn't take much. So in the past, we haven't been too keen to go and raise the trail because there's already low or the minimum typical required overhead clearance of 8 feet. And there's some permitting challenges about raising the trail through there. But given that we haven't identified the funding to actually construct the at-grade crossing signal, Clean Water Services has taken it upon themselves to work on designing and constructing how they would raise the trail under the bridge. They're about 60% design, and they're starting their permit applications right now. So it's a pretty big project for them to take on. They're hearing the community loud and clear. It would reduce the overhead clearance to about 7 feet. And so what we're working through right now is the advanced signage and any other potential warnings we could do to alert trail users to the low clearance. But so as more of a near-term solution, that is something that one of the partnering agencies is pursuing, which we're pretty excited about. So those two sort of relate together. Are there any other questions I could answer about those?
Did you mention it was going to be on demand, or is it going to be part of the light cycle from the light over at Nimbus? I think it's Nimbus.
My understanding is it would be activated, but we haven't got into that level of detail.
Okay. Right, sorry, you mentioned that earlier. I mean, that's another component that the county has brought up is, so there were some differing opinions between the agencies about if you do the at-grade crossing, would you close the undercrossing? And some folks thought you should, so that drivers get more accustomed to trail users always being there. But the county is pretty adamant that if they're going to approve a new signal here, they want the undercrossing to remain an option, you know, when it's not flooded, to reduce any conflicts up on the road when it's possible. As you travel towards 217, I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a lot of compressed stops there. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think I have to agree with the county on that, to keep the bottom as an option open, just because there are so many signals in that short span of space from the railroad tracks up to Conestoga.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not a traffic person, but that was part of the study where there was a progression analysis for certain amount of distance either side of this location to see how the signals would work together. And it did seem like it was feasible and wouldn't totally screw everything up. So.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, so just to the south or east of there, behind Ironwood Loop, is what we've sort of referred to as the goat trail, but this is another section of the trail in Tigard that has flooded. You can see this patch here is where the water comes up to sometimes, and then there's this dirt path that folks have worn into the lawn area, sort of a demand trail. So when we did our big All Things Fano Creek Trail open house last November, the suggestion was made, well, until you can do something there, could you at least put some wood chips down? So we did that while we worked to pave this. So our plan, which we are in the process of finishing, was to pave this dirt trail and then rip out the existing trail and restore it to wetland and vegetated corridor. So this has been a partner project with Clean Water Services. And I just want to show a couple pictures. So this is what it looked like last winter before we did anything. Oops, that's the wrong picture. Try again here. Okay, that one went away. So then we wood chipped it like had been requested, and it seemed like that was a good temporary solution.
I've been through there, and it really did make it a lot more user friendly.
Big help, yeah.
And in the last 3 weeks, we actually paved where those wood chips were, and then just last week, this is looking north, we ripped out the existing trail. And so we're just kind of in the final cleanup mode. We have to blend in some of these shoulders, put some seed down, and then in February, Clean Water Services is going to come in and actually do some planting. We're going to put up some chevrons or warning signs that there is this sort of abrupt change in direction. But turned out really well. It was done by our in-house crew, and Clean Water Services helped with the permitting and the planting. So we're pretty happy about this, and we're hoping that this helps with some of the flooding in the area.
Zach, was there any feedback from the residents on that path getting closer to the fence lines there?
From what I heard from the crew, from the guys that were out there every day, there were no complaints. They did knock on, we sent notifications to about 10 houses along here. I didn't hear from any of them. The person that lived here is the one that had the most open view and was the closest. They have chain link where some of these other people have, vegetation that sort of blocks their view, at least in the summer. He seemed very supportive of everything. He actually was offering to sort of keep an eye on equipment and stuff overnight. So as far as I've heard and the crew has heard, there was no real pushback or anyone upset about it yet. Anyways, people are just starting to use it, but.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so then I'm assuming most of this group is familiar, but the big Fano Creek Trail project that's been going on for years, well before I got to Tigard, is the Fano Creek Trail Connections project. And I'll just highlight those areas real quick. It will build a new segment from Woodard Park to Grant Avenue. It will repave the section behind City Hall from Ash Avenue to Hall Boulevard. It will also widen about the eastern half of that segment to the federal trail standards that we have to meet. It will build a new segment from Tigard Library to the cul-de-sac on Milton Court. And then it will build a new segment from the cul-de-sac on 85th Avenue south to the undercrossing to the existing Keokuts Bridge over the Tualatin River. I'd be happy to go into more detail on the specifics, but in case everyone's familiar, we had hoped to go to bid by this fall or early winter. We ran into some issues with finalizing our permit applications, and we're just starting that process now. So it's looking like we're going to try to bid in late spring of 2021, try to start construction next summer. It will for sure spill over into the summer of 2022. So definitely a 2-season build. So that's the update on that one, but I don't know if there's some specific questions. We mentioned as the meeting was getting started, we don't have any plans for additional committee engagement since we're just kind of in the final design of everything.
So I just have a question about the Fano Creek behind the the one that got downgraded, is that just a still repaving project of the bumps in the one closest to the city hall? Is that just basically repaving?
So this, I'll pull up the map. So from
faster like we did for over by Shoals.
Sorry.
And the kind of the follow-up question is, could that move along faster like was done around Shoals, since it's a mostly paving project with some clean water services partnership?
No.
Yeah, I'll answer both those. So starting up near close to Ash Avenue, all the way to just essentially the second pedestrian bridge, or the old rail car closest to City Hall, will just be a repaving. There's some sliver widening in there, but essentially trying to get an 8-foot trail. That's all we could get with all the environmental impacts. But from that point east, we'll be to the regional trail standard of a 12-foot wide paved trail with rock shoulders. So little more than a third of the project will widen it. The rest is more or less repaving. And then to your question, could it be sped up? No, it's tied with the federal money on the project, and it causes all kind of complications to try to do something like that. So it needs to stick with the project that it's in right now, given all the money that's been spent with federal money and design. So. Any other questions on this project?
Can you take the federal oversight like across there on a bike just to see how bumpy that is to make it speed up? Because that's probably.
I'm very familiar with the section, but there's nothing we can do to speed it up. It would involve repaying the Federal Highway Administration the money and then basically starting over. I mean, we're getting close. We realize people are ready for that to be done, and I think everyone on the team is ready. Also, we're doing our best to make it happen.
Well, I can't wait to go from Beaverton to Cook Park all on the same trail, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good segue to the Panther Creek Trail alignment study. Some of you, I think, were part of the committee that we spoke with about this in the fall last year. But once we do the project we just talked about, and I will zoom in here shortly so you can see what's going on, but the biggest gap will be remaining gap will be from Bonita Road in the north down to the segment we'll be building with that project down near Cook Park. And so we got a grant from Metro to study and essentially come up with a preferred alignment. I don't want to compare it to Southwest Corridor, but it's similar where it's pretty conceptual. We're just trying to figure out where to go. It's not design, where they're now moving into design. This is similar to the Shoals Ferry study where it's just a starting point, and then we would use it to try to go get additional money to keep the project going. And so there's a lot of stuff to consider with this stretch. In the stretch from Bonita to Durham, you have all these commercial and industrial parcels on the east side of the Greenway. You have a bunch of residential neighborhoods on the west side. You have the creek itself and the floodplain and all the environmental things that happen with that. You have the Bonita Road crossing, the Durham Road crossing. South of here, you have a railroad. Durham Road is very busy. Number of schools, the wastewater treatment plant, power lines, and again, the creek and all the environmental stuff. So in the beginning, we just sort of threw a bunch of ideas on the map. And if you, I'll just zoom in a little bit. Every route you see on here was something that we've looked at so far. Anything that's grayed out means it's been ruled out for one reason or another. And items that are still in color are the ones that are continue to be considered. So in the north, TriMet was talking about what's going on with the Bonita Station. We weren't really holding up our analysis to see what happens with the vote this fall. It just so happens with the other challenges we've been trying to work through, the timing is pretty close. So I couldn't tell you exactly what happens here related to Southwest Corridor, but headed south, we have a couple options where we could go through the Greenway. We're looking at both sides of the creek. This could impact parking to both of these places. So that's why we're still showing an option on 74th Avenue and then try to pop into the Greenway. walking through every single one of these, we've done it on a number of meetings with the team, takes hours. So I'm going to avoid that for now. But essentially in this northern segment, the greenway is looking promising. And then as we get towards Durham Road, there's sort of two general options. One is try to make our way up to 76th Avenue where it currently dead ends, or continue through the greenway, which has a lot of environmental impacts potentially, but then you have to figure out how to cross Durham Road, which could involve going underneath it. Given the concerns that happen at Shoals Ferry, there's a lot of hesitancy there, but it is different. It's different structure, different topography, but that's something that we're looking at. If we got down to 76th, we are looking at an on-street or a street corridor section where it might be something like the bikes are sharing lanes with the travel lanes with sharrows and then sidewalks on both sides. And then I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to see this, but when you actually look at all the complications down here, we're actually going to be proposing that the trail go along Durham Road. And it would repurpose the right-of-way that's there. So if you could imagine taking an existing bike lane and an existing sidewalk and combining their width together and then separating them horizontally with a planar strip or something like that. That's sort of the concept we're starting to toy around with, so that you could get a separated multi-use path through here. Clean Water Services had mentioned they're open to some meandering to get it off the road through what essentially is their park at the treatment plant. And then to 85th Avenue, same type of thing. Repurpose the space that's there, maybe eliminate some parking that already is limited on the east side. And the southern half of 85th is already closed off to vehicular public access. And one huge benefit of that is it would tie into the segment we're doing down here with the other project that we spent a ton of money on. We spent a lot of time looking at these routes. We know that Durham was really interested in getting a connection for their neighborhoods to the elementary school. We know that there's the existing trail network in Durham City Park, but crossing the railroad with transmission lines is very difficult. The railroad has basically said they would not entertain a new crossing. We looked at going through and behind the school properties and the treatment plant, and some of them could be technically feasible, but the user experience and security become a big concern. Like this segment behind the treatment plant would essentially be fenced on both sides, one for the treatment plant, one for the railroad. And so there's like 1,800 linear feet of just fenced trail that's for an urban setting sort of out of sight. And so there are some safety concerns. So once we did through it, that's kind of where we're at. We intend in the next month or two to go back to our committees as well as do a virtual public open house to present what we think is the final preferred alignment. So eliminate some of this optionality that's on here as we finish some of our analysis, and get feedback. And, you know, depending on how that feedback goes, similar to the Shoals Ferry study, then the next step would be to pursue funding when there are opportunities that arise. So I know that was a lot for this project, and there's plenty of detail that we could get into, but is there anything I could clear up or answer about this one?
For like the kind of split pathways you're talking about on Durham there, what influences have you been looking at for design potentially? Like I'm thinking of like Polk Street in San Francisco is a good example of like split off bike lane with using vegetation to split bike from road and pedestrian.
To date, we haven't really got into the specific design. I mean, we are going to consider actual widths, but it's sort of more conceptual in nature.
Right, but I mean, what would your board have you been like thinking about what could be influencing this? Not even for specific designs and measurements, but like what is kind of an ultimate goal for what that could look like if that ends up being the route?
Like I was saying before, and I don't know if maybe it wasn't clear, but essentially like a mixed use path. It wouldn't be the same dimensions, but something that comes to mind for me that's similar is Cornelius Pass Road from Cornell to Highway 26, where you have a pretty major roadway, but a separated bike ped facility off to the side. There they have a separate bike facility. You know, there's 12 feet dedicated to bikes and then a 6-foot sidewalk. This would be more of a mixed use path. So I don't know of a specific street in the region that would look like it, but you know, after we went through all this analysis, that was really kind of the only option that seemed like was feasible to get a regional trail through there that met the various design criteria with safety and comfort and, you know, all the various things that we've heard from folks. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think as this gets along a little bit further, and if that does end up becoming the route, I think that beyond even just the region, but even looking nationally and globally for examples of what that could work like, would be helpful for us to visualize what could be seen on that stretch of the road if that, like I said, is the ultimate solution.
Sure.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great input, and we're working with a landscape architecture firm on this, and I'm sure they've got that in the back of their minds as they're looking at all these routes.
Yeah, we'll be coming up with some renderings even at this stage to try to visually show it. Like I said, it might not show dimensions, but it would get the picture across of how that corridor could be repurposed and what it would look and feel like. And then I think that's a great suggestion if we can find some examples that are similar to try to include those. So
yeah, because I think what I'm asking for is like basically showing your work, not just show us a render what it could be, like show us what the influence was, where you were looking to see of places that worked, maybe look at places that didn't work that you were considering, just because that would be kind of a novel thing in the city for us to take a look at.
Sure. Good suggestion.
Great. Okay, do we have any additional questions? We still have Richard talk about our self-guided project tour. So I sure appreciate the presentation, Zach. It's very exciting.
And I will leave it up to you all. There was one other project that Carla was going to mention.
Did you have another project?
Briefly,
okay.
Yeah, I can do this very quickly.
That's fine.
Here, I'll just share my screen really quickly. So here, can you see something with trail amenities on it?
Yes.
So what we've got is, so right now the Fano Creek Trail Connections project is federally funded. That funding is tied to transportation. We see the Fano Creek Trail as a major transportation facility, but it also serves many purposes in a community this size. So in order to make sure that our future amenities that we have along the trail work with the current project, we have two projects running parallel: the Fano Creek Trail Amenities Project and the Fano Creek Trail Connections Project. And that's so that we know that the base work of the trail that's going to be placed down, the hardcore kind of transportation facility, will work with amenities that we foresee in the future as part of that trail. And so we have a draft report done, but I've asked for additional scope so that we can activate the library site more heavily than what we did in our initial study. So basically, this study looks at where we can put in different features, what those enhancements will be like. We got quite a bit of community input as to what types of features were their favorites. So I just want you guys to know that we're planning for the future of the trail. Like, we're not just building a transportation facility. It's going to be sort of this is a big deal, a big sort of centerpiece for recreation and for tourism in Tigard. So that's just the aspect of us planning ahead for that. And that's it. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Carla.
Mm-hmm.
Carla, this is Richard. Is the Trails Amenity Study, is that online yet?
It is not, because it's still in draft form.
Okay, all right.
And we'll have it out. We're just wrapping up, or we're just wrapping up the scope for the library. And so I'll have them start on that. We want to engage that site a little bit more as part of the trail, like really enrich that library area. And once that's done, incorporate it into the report, then we'll put it online.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I thought I was unmuted. Richard, would you like to go ahead and share information on the self-guided tour?
Sure, no problem. I know we're running short on time. When I was going over this with Ruth and Dave, it was more just kind of a snapshot of everything going on in Tigard right now. A little bit of, you know, completed projects and future projects and things that are happening right now. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at it, or do you have any questions about it?
I did not get a chance to do it. I apologize.
Okay, all right.
Has anybody thought of like a potential bike route around there? I mean, I have one that's close to my house where it starts at, but I'm just wondering if there's anybody that's taken some thoughts about that.
On what was that?
On like routing for reviewing information. I'm sorry, I may have heard. Is this for the? I may have heard it incorrectly. Then. Sorry.
No, we're talking the self-guided tour.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I thought I heard right then. Has anybody thought about like a potential bike route to tour these areas? You know, safer content?
No. No, I don't think anybody has thought about that. In fact, when I was putting it together, I thought I'd have a chance to go out and look at the sites, but that never happened. So, no. In fact, when I was numbering them and labeling them, it was more just start at one end and go to the other. So I didn't think about much even driving to each of these. But things that I found interesting was, and a lot of it we just covered, was how much is actually going on Fannel Creek Trail. And it was kind of refreshing to see Zach and Carla present some of the same information that I had pulled from the internet too. And also the Hall Boulevard stuff that is in the virtual tour is the final design review copy. So you should have, for the Southwest Corridor, at least the Hall Station information in there is the most current. I think the goal was just to have this be something that maybe people could do on their own, and then we could come back and discuss it. Or if anybody had questions about it, we could talk it over. And
I want to do it with someone else from the committee, like a buddy system. Who wants to do it with me?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's hard to kind of organize. It would be the only thing that I'm, you know, as I was going through it, Richard, you did a great job. It does kind of move here and there. And I've been out looking at some of them as I drive around town. But I think being able to take a bike ride around, you know, especially the Fannel Creek piece and some of those others would be great. I just don't know how we would go about organizing it.
Yeah, I think that was part of the idea, was that we all can't get together and go tour these, but at least this gives us the context of something to start with that maybe we could do individually, or even just review the document. And for some of these, you know, there's as much information as we're going to get, because like the bridge, North Dakota Street Bridge and the Tigard Street Bridge, those are all, you know, in design. So it's pretty much a future project to kind of keep in mind.
On Sunday, September 13th, I will ride a bike on this. Anybody want to go with me? Let me know.
Yeah, well, this is Ben. I might be willing. Why don't you hit me up directly, via
will.
email. And,
I will.
You know, I'm out of shape, so
It's okay.
it won't be a race.
It's okay.
Alan here too. I would be interested.
Yeah.
We can put the mask
Mask
on.
up. Yep, mask up. Yep.
Mask up, of course.
Hey, I have some feedback from a community member. I was just visiting a friend this afternoon that lives off of Whistler's, and they're excited to see that the 121st project is going forward. And I was told I had to leave to go to a TTAC meeting, and these folks asked me to thank the TTAC group for advancing the 121st Street project. So for those of us who voted for it, thank you from the community.
It's been 10 years plus coming since I first moved in near that area. I was like, oh my God. So yeah, no, it's great to see it starting to come together. I agree.
If Lonnie, if you do come up with a bike tour map, I would like to see how you organize it. So.
Oh, I'm not going to organize nothing. I'm just going to jump on a bike and go for a ride along the Fennel Creek Trail.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, come knock on my door, Lonnie.
I will.
Yeah, I'll start looking at it too, and see if there's a good spot. But it's not going to be like the one from a couple years ago in the bike head subcommittee that we did.
No, not that advanced.
Yeah.
No.
And I do want to thank Richard for putting those materials together. They look really great.
Yes.
Almost like a professional did it. I'm very impressed. I imagine that you put a lot of time and effort into those. So thank you very much. Much appreciated.
I'm glad to do it. Glad to do it. I don't really have anything more to add to it. So.
Okay, well, I think it's great, and it's a tool certainly for this committee to be looking at. And, if people have opportunities to go and look at things, and we can talk about it at the next meeting, or if there's something that we want to look at further as a group, we can kind of look at that too. So kind of gives us a guideline for maybe doing a tour next year, next summer, when we can all go together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Quick comment, Council President Goodhouse. Just since we're talking about the Fennel Creek Trail, putting a little tour things together, there is on Parks and Rec on the city's Facebook page. There is a virtual 5K coming up that's going to be for a week. So it does use part of the Fennel Creek Trail. There's kind of a predetermined route. You just take a picture of yourself doing it, submit it. So it's a way to socially distance, but do like a walk or bike or run virtual 5K. So if people want to take a look at that.
Great. Thank you for reminding us of that. Well, thank you, everyone. Boy, it's been an evening of information, that's for sure. I appreciate everybody's comments and participation. It looks like our next meeting will be in October, and it should be October 7th. And I'll be talking with Joe and Dave about the agenda, and we'll get that out. I'm sorry I cut out all the information sharing. Does anybody have things that they would like to share? We're just a little bit over time. Okay. Well, then I think our meeting is adjourned.